We are live at 5. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to the Health Equity Council's show. This is Salud y Querencia, and this is our community talkback. I'm here with my co-host, Diana Lopez.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
And today we are going to be talking about food security, food systems, and food action in the state of New Mexico, Bernalillo County. So we are so grateful for everyone that has chosen to join us and spend their evening with us. We have a very special guest from Okeowinge Pueblo. And I'm going to introduce her. Her name is Camila Cruz, and she is going to open us with a poem. So I'm asking all of our guests to mute. It looks like I have several guests that are logging in. If you can, everyone mute out. And when our poet is speaking, we ask that everyone turn their camera off. So we want to give all of this, So thank you, everyone. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Camila, to introduce yourself. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Dr. Roybal. Singitamo, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Camila Cruz from Okeowinge here in northern New Mexico. Food sovereignty is a topic close to my heart. I've spoken frequently on this topic. I am a poet from the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, currently working on my master's. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our topic with a poem this evening, so that way we can get started. Rematriation. Rematriation, the act of returning to the maternal ways, the mother foods. She came home in yucca centennial stalks, straddling the borders of 4 desert states, sulking from drought, stretched on her tiptoes, asking the sun to scorch less. She came home in river shells her granddaughter holds to ears, eyes closed, searching for a voice drifted away with monsoons. She came home in the paper my degree is printed on. Flat, hundreds of trees deadened to provide a place for my name. She came home in whispering corn tassels, silk sewn through blue corn, pearl kernels, yellow corn, purple kernels, sagging under an eager harvest moon. And moon loves her in all her reincarnations. She came home to nourish unplanted gardens, unsown fields. She came home without knowing she was gone. Rematriation, maternal knowledge, our mother's milk, kissing kernels in hunger, fishing out silks stuck between teeth. Rematriation, the act of returning to our mother foods. Thank you.
Thank you, Camila. Thank you, everyone. And I'm going to ask again for everyone, all of our guests that are visiting us on Zoom, to mute. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I apologize, in the chat, we'll be monitoring and making sure everyone, we just want our sound quality to just be exceptional, the best that we can right now with this Zoom. So thank you so much, Camila, for sharing that lovely poem and opening us up tonight. So Salud y Querencia is a show we started about a year ago. This is a web series, and we have multiple topics and shows that you can actually locate on the Health Equity Council's website. So these and other shows will be housed there for everyone to go back and enjoy and follow. There's lots of different pieces that come out, lots of policy recommendations, and lots of community engagement. So that's there and that's open for everyone. So I invite everyone to visit the Health Equity Council website to view some of our previous shows and topics. So tonight we have some very special guests, and I'm going to hand that over to Diana Lopez to introduce our guests and the topic for our show.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Roybal, and thank you all for joining. We have an amazing lineup of guests today. We have Marcus Porter, Senior Community Initiatives Manager for Network Services at Roadrunner Food Bank. Marcus is a tirelessly advocate for civil rights, food justice, and equitable treatment of neighbors across New Mexico. We have Jessica Osenbrew here, is a is the Health and Wellness Initiative Manager at Roadrunner Food Bank. Jessica promotes public health through food bank and healthcare partnerships. She's also a part of New Mexico Primary Care, Health Equity Council, New Mexico Chronic Disease and Prevention, and American Heart Association. And let's see, we also have Sky Otiveros, is the director of the International District Food Hub and co-chair of the International District Healthy Community Coalition. Sky Community organizes across around healthy environments and food access, facilitates donations, supports cooking classes, and collects food behavior data. She supports local gardening efforts and loves to food map, climb, run, and cook. We have Saira Namaste here, who is the co-director of American Friends Service Committee of New Mexico. Saira created farmer training, farm to school, and farm to Head Start programs, 3 farmer cooperatives, Agricultura Network, and a school garden curriculum with farmers and teachers. She is the farm worker union organizer and longtime member of the Recuerda Cesar Chavez committee. And last but certainly not least, we have Zia Martinez here with us tonight. She is the Bernalillo County Urban Agriculture Coordinator and Southwest Organizing Project Community Garden Manager. Zia is a local traditional farmer and youth worker. Previously, she interned at Cornelio Candelaria Organics and ran the Robert F. Kennedy Farm to School program. She also has assisted with welding, auto body shop, and culinary arts education classes. Wonderful. We are so excited to have all of our guests here tonight. And I'll hand it back to Dr. Roybal so we can get started with our conversation.
Thank you so much, Diana, and thank you so much, all of our guests that are joining us this evening. Food security, food access, this is our topic for the evening. I myself am a medical sociologist, and when we're looking at the social determinants of health, and we're looking at a lot of the different health outcomes, this all rolls back to food. Food access, healthy foods. Where is our food located? How has it been changed over the years? New Mexico has a very long history of farming, traditional farming. This dates back, thousands of years prior to the annexation, becoming part of the United States. This dates back to, the inception of our First Nations and our tribal people on this land. So farming, we have a very, very close relationship and culture that food is almost, you could say, part of our religion, right? The way we treat our food, the way we treat our land, and all these pieces, all of these things have changed. And now New Mexico today, according to Feeding America in 2020, New Mexico had an overall food insecurity rate of 19.6, almost 20%. 20% of New Mexico's population is experiencing food insecurity. As far as child insecurity, it's about 30%. So 1 in every 3 children in the state of New Mexico today are experiencing food insecurity. So today we're going to just start this conversation, and we're going to talk about in the context of Bernalillo County, but let's also expand that out to New Mexico in relation to all of our different communities that are impacted. So we have some really great guests today, and to kind of explore this, thinking through like your perspectives. All of our team today that is on board plays a critical role in addressing food insecurity. And so we understand the statistics, we understand like the nature of this, and we really want to think into the future. What needs to be done? What can we do? What role can the community play? How can they engage with your organizations? And most importantly, if we have individuals or anybody out there in Facebook or families or community members that are experiencing food insecurity, to reach out, to go ahead, and we're going to ask all of our guests here today, maybe there's some resources that we can share out to the public as well, or even those that would like to volunteer. So we just ask everybody to sign in the chat. When our guests are speaking or the conversation, we just ask that everyone remains muted, and you are welcome to join the conversation. So we just have a couple questions to start us off, but we do want to open this up to the public. We want to make sure that everybody that's out there, even on Facebook, if you have a question for any of our guests, please, we ask that you freely ask that question. This is really a conversation. This is a community conversation, and this is something so that individuals that are not working with the Department of Health or the city or any of our institutions like the university, but are actually within our communities. If there's questions, we want to we want to be that bridge. Salud y Querencia is that bridge between the community and between and all of our partners. And so it is open for anyone and everyone, to ask questions and to get involved and engage. So let's go ahead and start. But before, I just want to take one moment before we get moving and invite Larry, who is also with the Health Council, to make a quick announcement about some of the events that will be happening in April. And then we'll jump into our conversation. So Larry, if you wanted to share with our public today some of the events that you have taking place around violence prevention.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me be here in this space with you all. I'm really excited. Yes, my wife and myself have our own organization where we do presentations and do working in the community. Our background is in sexual and domestic violence. And so it is April. So April is like our best month. We love being out in April for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so we actually have a save the date. I'm going to see if I can share it with you all. Okay, yeah. It'll be Tuesday, April 4th from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. We're going to have a conversation from 6 to 7. And my wife will be displaying her Sacred Souls display, which she displays every year. And I would actually can put that all where it's going to be located and how you can RSVP and all of that in the chat. But I also would like to probably come back in April and talk a little bit more about just sexual violence in general.
Absolutely. And that's something that we're thinking about putting on an entire Salud show just dedicated to talking about violence in our community. So thank you so much, Larry. And please put all the information in the chat, and you can do that throughout the show. So as other people start to join, they can see that as well. So thank you so much. And next month is it's a violence prevention month.
Yes, sorry, I was muted. I thought I wasn't, but yes.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump back into our food security topics. And so we're just going to start with our first question. In your perspective, and we'll start with Saida. In your perspective, what is the heart? What is causing this major food insecurity and this issue, and what's happening here in the city of Albuquerque, Bernalillo County?
Food insecurity is caused by poverty. So people don't have money to buy food. It makes them food insecure. Most of us don't grow everything we eat. We do rely on other people to grow it and buy it from them. So our rates of poverty are higher in New Mexico than the rest of the country. So our rates of food insecurity are higher. I was talking to a friend whose rent went from $750 a month to $1,000 a month, but her wages didn't match that. So she can't reduce her electricity cost that much. Her heat went up. Her phone bill hasn't changed. None of her other costs have changed. So the only place that she can cut is food. And we know our housing costs have really gone up and wages aren't going up. So I'll just be brief and say poverty causes food insecurity.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and pass it to Jessica. And all of our guests, you're welcome to unmute, all of our panelists. And let's just talk about this. So housing is causing, and so this is something major that's entwined, right? There's nothing that, everything intersects and one causes the other. And it's really important, right? Because that's something that we've been dealing with here in the city of Albuquerque and across the state. And that's the increase in rent and this housing crisis that's being caused. So that's a predictor. Jessica, if you want to go ahead and comment.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for your remark. I wholeheartely agree with that. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, there's a few different concepts that really define food security. and that is access to food, utilization of food, affordability to food, as well as the stability in having access, affordability, and utilization. So when I think about this question, I really think about this key point of long-term stability in access, affordability, and utilization of food. And in the past few years, there hasn't been very much that's been very stable. The whole globe has been engaged in a pandemic. And for the reasons that Sarah has pointed out, we've seen a lot of instability in the economy, in global food supply and distribution, with housing. And so that makes it very difficult for people to access food, in addition to getting the right kinds of foods that maybe fit what one's preferences or cultural attributes or relationship to food, as well as I work with a lot of individuals who are managing health conditions and maybe need specific types of foods. And that's a part of what the issue is in creating food and nutrition insecurity.
Thank you, Jessica. Very good point. So we have a lot of different areas, right? Access, affordability, long-term stability. We know that after the crisis, the COVID, we were dealing with very high levels, and that's kind of how we met Saida and some of the other team, thinking through like how your organizations were working really diligently to address that gap, and we'll circle back to that because I think it's really important. Zia, what is your take on the food security issue?
I guess I would just like to highlight the poverty and access is such a huge thing, and availability to cook the food and use the food that people actually are able to get. I think it's also important to highlight that a lot of the food in stores don't last as long as they could. So the food waste is a lot higher once they can access those foods. And if you don't have time, the food's just going to go to rot. Why buy healthier foods? And I think it's really important too that this has been an issue since I started working with an ag in 2014. So there's a lot of groups who have been working with community members and families to bring healthy food and bring the education needed or exposure more likely to these different communities.
Thank you, Zia. And Marcus.
Thank you. I agree with everything that's been said so far, but one of the key issues is recognition of those items by people who have the power to change it. We've started to see some of that coming from the state, more things being allocated to food banks, for instance, but poverty as it pertains to wages and rent, city council can do certain things about rent control. The state can do certain things about wages. If you don't have savings, obviously there's nothing to fall back on when you do hit a rough period where states or institutions can't step in. So it's recognizing all of the issues we have and having people who have an open ear to do something about it. That's really one of the largest issues we have and why this is so perpetual.
Thank you. We're going to get deeper into that as we start kind of thinking through all of the different determinants of food security. Z made like a really good point. Like a lot of people, may not know how to prepare foods. Our entire food system has been shocked and changed, and generations are changing the way food is even prepared, or what that even looks like. Or is it even healthy if it stays on the shelf that long? So there's a lot of questions and a lot of pieces here, right? We know that in other countries, they don't have the same preservatives. And so you do have to cook the food within 24 or 40 hours, but we don't have a culture like that here in the United States. So there's a lot of different pieces that I find very interesting, and thinking through what is the healthiest way and what is the mechanism and how can this be done? I want to even reflect back on traditional New Mexico, thinking around preparing food and like, how do we really conceptualize poverty, and how can we actually how have we survived this long we've always had these low levels of income and things like that, but have never experienced insecurity at this level, right? So there's these dynamic shifts that are taking place generationally. If I'm going to let Sky actually weigh in on the topic, and then let's talk about this conversation. I find it really interesting, and I think the idea of poverty and allowing poverty to really change the way that we think about food and what we can and cannot do is really interesting. So go ahead, Sky.
Hi, thank you. And I want to apologize. My camera wasn't working. So sorry, you guys. I'm just a floating name. And I also want to say thank you. A lot of my knowledge around food came from working in Albuquerque and with a lot of people here. So thank you. I help out at the International District Food Hub, and we collect a lot of behavioral data. So we look at what people are grabbing, and how are they preparing it, how often, when, and who do they cook for. And honestly, looking at the data, so we serve about 100 to 200 individuals each food hub, and that really breaks down to about 30 to 40 families. And we have a lot of growers like Zia, shout out to Southwest Organizing Project. They actually supply a lot of our fresh produce, a lot of beautiful produce that won't be taken. And this is like this has really amazed me because we think that access is about having actual physical access. But when we supply a lot of organic produce for free, people have access, they don't take it. What do they take? They take a lot of instant stuff and they take snacks. So we did a deep dive on why is this, what's some of the behaviors. And when we look at like how often people cook a day, it's still 3 to 4. They still eat about 3 to 4 times a day, but they're not preparing meals in like actually chopping it up in about like 45-minute meals. And when we ask people why, we have about 66 respondents. The number one response was time. So for us, for me, from what I have seen, food insecurity is a lot about time, especially when you're looking at families. Our demographics, about 70% of our folks who come to the food hub are parents. About 40% of them are single parents, so more than half of them are parents, and about 60% of them are women. A lot of this in the household falls on a lot of women to take care of the kids, to get them ready for school, and yes, cook breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But you know what they say? We don't have the time. Yes, we have access, but we don't always have the time. And something that Zia said, I think others alerted to, is they're not necessarily familiar with a lot of quick chop-in cooking methods with fresh produce. Yes, they might know how to cook per se, but a quick, efficient way to use fresh produce is not at the forefront of their mind. And again, when we offer, so we asked our respondents who is willing to learn how to cook. Over 50% of them wanted to take cooking classes, but when it comes down to it, only 10 people will actually dedicate time. And again, when we ask, okay, you want to learn, you have this will, why don't you? Time. And I don't want to break it down to something that's simple, but that's something that I think of often when I'm reflecting on our data. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And go ahead and unmute, Diana. No, this is time. This is so interesting, right? So our food culture, our time culture. So we're right now we're kind of exploring, and I want to open it up to actually anybody that's in this Zoom space to even weigh in on. So it looks like this is getting to the heart of it, right? Time. So we have access, we have location, but our food culture has shifted, right? The time that we have to prepare. Thank you so much, Sky, for sharing those demographics. 60% are women and single mothers, parents, possibly parents that are working multiple jobs. So wages, living wage, rents going up. That was a really great point about having to choose food, or maybe work a second job to cover the rent. So there's a lot of pieces here. I'm going to just open it up for conversation, to be honest, because I think we're seeing, I mean, you're having to throw away food, right? You have food, and I'm sure there's people watching in the audience today, and so we definitely want to let them know that they can actually access fresh food from your organizations, Sky and Zia and Jessica, and I think all of your organizations, right, provide that. But let's just open it up for conversation. Is that something that others are seeing here? I see that we have a lot of guests that are joining us from some other food hubs and other farms and organization, but it looks like this is a collective, this is an issue that needs to be solved collectively, or really thought out collectively. So, I mean, I would like to open that if there's anybody else here that wants to chime in. And then if not, go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, Dr. Rebel, can I just ask Sky a quick question? And I definitely invite others if they know the answer, or if they have any tidbits around it. But Sky, yeah, I really appreciate your information that you provided, and that you mentioned the cooking classes. And I was just wondering, in terms or around the cooking classes, teaching, are the cooking classes designed around like certain techniques? Is there like evidence backing the techniques? Like, is there a kind of system or a strategy towards those cooking classes to teach people how to easily prepare certain foods? Like, is there any, I guess, I don't know. I'm kind of thinking evidence-based curriculum, but I don't know if we're that detailed around it. Would you be able to share some more information about that around the cooking classes?
Sure, thank you. We partner with ICANN based out of UM, and they are the state certified educator for, I might say this wrong, I think state certified educator for SNAP. And I believe they have 4 to 5 different types of series of cooking classes. Now, the ones that they are offering to our food hub are nutrition and budget based for short meals. And even though I believe their curriculum is evidence-based and well-developed and implemented at many other sites other than ours, we have made special requests based on our own demographics and what we see grab the most. So again, not proud of this, but one of the highest amount of products that's taken from our pantry are instant products. When we did a survey of 5 different food hubs looking at 248 different families, the one thing that's grabbed almost over 90% of the time is instant noodles and snacks. So in 5 food hubs, we gave out over 1,100 instant noodles and snacks. And so we asked, can you do something with Top Ramen? Can you make it healthy? And they said yes. So I don't know if anyone is here from ICANN, shout outs to them. But again, I just do want to be transparent that getting someone to, there's series is a series. You can't just go to one class. It's a commitment. If you want to go to all like 3 or 4, however long the series is, you get a certificate. Having someone, especially most of our folks are single parents with kids, dedicate almost 2 hours during the weekday has been very, very difficult. Again, shout out to ICANN. Thank you for letting me highlight that.
Thank you, Sky. Thank you so much for sharing that. No, this is very, very interesting. So when we're thinking like food security and food, we have these other factors, right, that weren't even, we're thinking. I want to go back a little bit and talk about some of your organizations and what they provide and what they, what their challenge is. And I think maybe that'll give us a little bit more insight to connect this larger puzzle, right? Because it's a cultural, like it's, there's a cultural shift in the preparation of food and the way that things are done and instant and time. And so we have all these other factors that are playing into this. And thinking through, wasting and having, have a lot of food waste. And we know that was happening a lot before, but I mean, that's really interesting, right? So there's a shift. Saida, if you want to like comment a little bit maybe on on your, and I'm deviating from all of these questions because this led us to something really interesting that needs to be addressed and thought about, right? What are we teaching? How are we teaching? Is there, what's really happening? Go ahead, Saida.
Yeah, I can share a little bit about what AFSC does. We import so much of our food into New Mexico, and I'm so happy to see some farmers that are in the chat. So hey to Daisy and Ian and the farmers who are the next generation of farmers as we see more aging. I helped create a farmer training program. So none of the things said in my bio I did by myself. I only do things collectively. And there was a real need for farmer training. I'm happy that the model's been picked up by other organizations. But just like learning, the growing of food and passing that on, that peer-to-peer learning from farmer to farmer through New Mexico, through generations, as you talked about, Carmela, like this knowledge has been here since the first peoples. And so like learning to grow in the desert. And when I was doing that program, a lot of the farmers were like, we're glad that these kind of higher end restaurants can afford our organic local food, but we really want to feed our neighbors. We really want to feed, the people the community we live in. We don't eat at these restaurants. And again, glad that they're buying the food, but because of our food system, subsidizing corporate agribusinesses, subsidizing monocrops, subsidizing pesticide use, and these corporate farms often exploit their labor, the farm workers. These small scale organic farms can't compete price point. So they're always going to look like more expensive. And so we created the Farm to School program. It's 9 years old. Farm to Head Start program is 6 years old, wanting to make sure that the food that the farmers, I work with 30 small scale farmers, is actually reaching our own community folks, not just those who can afford it. And then the Farm to Food Bank program came out during COVID when we just really wanted to help farms stay afloat and then make sure that the food bank, which was having, unprecedented needs. So thank you to all the food pantries that kept people fed during the pandemic and getting the food like locally over to them. And that whole concept was just like, everyone should have food, everyone should have access to good food, but the price, often comes as the problem. It's not the only problem working with the Farm to Head Start program, and Head Start is income, you have to be income qualified. My daughter went to it. So you have to be a low income person to go to Head Start. So we wanted those kids to have healthy food, local food, because probably their family can't afford that. It is more expensive. The kids often rejected the food. So mistakes that we made was we thought like, well, if we subsidize it, if I can raise the money to subsidize it, I was bringing samples from local farms to the cooks, and they're like, yeah, we want to support local farms, but the kids are rejecting the food. So we turned it into activities for kids. So we have our great carrot crunch, we have our terrific turnip tasting, our cherry tomato chomp, give peas a chance. So the kids are getting excited. They get a sticker if they chomp on a carrot. They do coloring pages. They learn the letter C. They learn the colors. We've done farmer visits. I see that Daisy's here from Chispas. Chispas Farm brought a goat to the Head Start, so the kids got to play with the goat. Fidel from Los Jardines de Moctezuma planted seeds, brought his drum, talked about indigenous ways of growing. And then we see kids trying the vegetables and getting excited. And we know the long-term health outcome is that if we can intervene at a young age and develop kids' palate for healthy eating, when we have a crisis of juvenile diabetes and childhood obesity, and we see a racial gap, right? It's not fair that because we have systemic racism, because we have classism, health outcomes are different based on your zip code, based on your skin color, right? So we want to reach the communities with good, healthy food. And with our young kids, they do like hot Cheetos, right? And they might not have had peas before, sweet peas. So I really love the work that I get to do with farmers and with community to make sure that everyone has access to food, regardless of income.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I love that. Give peas a chance. So you're
I
really,
know.
you're really giving. So that's a cultural shift, right? We're having to shift the palate, the taste, all of these different pieces, and that's something that's been changed and kind of eroded over time. To where you're right, these other types of foods or sugary foods or foods that are, working in Head Start for years, I was a Head Start director. And so trying to bring health, good food in, fresh food and changing the way, and it is different by region. It is different, when you're in an urban center, you're going to have more, and in rural areas, vegetables are very normal. For students and children, and they're out there farming, so they kind of understand that. So we kind of see how there's different regional differences. So that's really interesting, Saida, and I love that. And if anyone's interested or has any questions for Saida, please throw it in the chat. But I love that work, and taking a goat to to the little ones so they can understand that was very normal here in New Mexico. It was very normal to butcher and to grow your food and to plant and how that's, you know, shifted. And maybe being in an urban, right, Bernalillo County, the city of Albuquerque, when we're thinking about these urban centers, how there's just kind of even that lack of access and understanding all of the different, you know, natural vegetables. And you have this large movement moving back into the farming space, you know, trying to reclaim that space and trying to redo that space. There's a lot of challenges, but I think that's really exciting. I'll get to you, Diana. We have
Yeah,
we wanna
thanks.
hear
Thanks so
from our
much.
other guests.
Yeah, thanks so much. And Jessica and Marcus, I would love to hear your perspective coming from Roadrunner Food Bank. If you're seeing similar things at various distribution sites. I know you guys have distribution sites all over the state. And I do want to also draw attention to the chat because there are a few little kind of conversations and questions going on. But I'll turn it over to Jessica and Marcus right now to give us your perspective. And then Kateri, I'm gonna, after they're done, I'll highlight your question in the chat.
Well, wonderful. Marcus, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. At our distributions, one of the things we do care a lot about, and we've been doing a lot of community assessments, a lot of grassroots activities, and we actually have something in the South Valley going on Friday to figure out more culturally appropriate food so that people do come and do want to use that food. If we talk about culturally in general, our shift away from kind of natural foods and going to the processed items, I think that happened probably in the turn of the century, with the last century anyway, when it was about safety and people thought if it came from a factory that it would be safer. And we never kind of switched back away from that. So a lot of the ideas around that type of healthy eating and being closer to the earth in that way has just changed overall. So someone needing food doesn't change their cultural outlook on what we do as Americans. And that's one of the things that I became very aware of. People being in need doesn't change them from anybody else. What they might want to eat, whether it's healthy or not, what they're more comfortable with. So grassroots efforts are what we're pursuing to try to make sure that we're on top of that. Yeah, Jessica talked about all the sampling and stuff that they do. But we do see that. A lot of people come to a food distribution. It maybe lasts about 2 weeks. There have been studies about how often do people need to come versus how often they do come. Because you might need 2 or 3 times, but you feel the stigma, or maybe the food isn't something you can work with, or you've been getting the same food week after week after week. So it's not something that you normally need, but so many cans of green beans, before you start just wanting to stop coming. So engagement, figuring out what foods are best, and the gigantic battle of shifting cultural changes isn't the easiest thing. And we aren't like the pros at changing American culture, but we're taking it one step at a time and just engaging with everybody in as many ways as we can.
Thank you, Marcus. And I'd like to add to that within the food bank network, there's about 200 food banks across the nation. Roadrunner Food Bank is a member agency of Feeding America, which is our national umbrella. There's cultural shifts that's happening within the charitable food network and within food banking to really shift away from measuring our impact in local communities and just calories and in pounds. And there's a lot of diversification in our program. So I'll talk a little bit about the program that I oversee, which is the Health and Wellness Initiative, which is the arm of programming that really works in tandem with the healthcare delivery system, addressing food and nutrition insecurity. And I would say about 70 to 80% of food banks across the nation have some form of a health and wellness initiative. It may be called something different, but it's really an ideal and a recognition by food banks in serving diverse communities and being able to interact with community members who are managing nutrition-related chronic health conditions, diabetes, kidney disease, cardiovascular disease, and trying to think about how can we better serve these community members and the community in a more proactive way in providing healthier foods to community, particularly to members who are experiencing episodic or chronic food and nutrition insecurity throughout their lifespan, but also engaging in some of the aspects that Sky was talking about cooking and nutrition, and recognizing not only is there poverty in terms of economics and financial, but there's also time poverty. We talk about this all the time at Roadrunner Food Bank. And an element that we've been bringing in to a lot of our distributions and our service work is trying to work more upstream, look at root causes, and really trying to understand the journey that the community member has had and is on in their experience of food and nutrition insecurity, and understanding other aspects that may be happening in their life that are barriers to optimal health. So in the Healthy Food Center, which is the picture that you see behind me, we do have a little bit of some community resource navigation. A lot of community-based organizations and healthcare organizations are doing that. But when we're learning a little bit about that experience of health-related social needs, housing issues, childcare issues, we know too that this is also taking up people's time, right? In trying to prioritize these issues, address these issues. So we're trying to support efforts in alleviating both the financial aspects as well as the time aspects in providing food and providing quick ways to have nutrition engagement, nutrition nudges. How can we prepare healthier meals quickly so that we are receiving the nourishment that we need for our bodies and better managing health conditions?
I really love that. I really love that, Jessica. And I started thinking, from this conversation and from what you and Marcus added, and then also kind of keeping in mind Terry's question in the chat, I started thinking about when I was younger. And I remember there was this whole kind of push or media or advertisement for like TV dinners for convenience, microwavable dinners. It was such a treat to get one. I remember being young, like the little kids cuisine, and we all know that it's not the greatest. But I do want to focus. I want to highlight the question in the panel, the question in the chat, and it is, how might we describe the stages of change that have made our food system what they are today? What were they before, and how were they supplanted? And I also want to recognize that Zia does have her hand up as well. So I'll open that question up to the panel. And Zia, if you want to start us off or provide your comment.
Yeah, I was just listening to the discussion that everyone was having, and all of like the highlighted intergenerational impacts that food and our access to food and our relationship with food, and how that has changed so drastically through just like even 3 generations. I was listening a lot to what Saida was saying about how kids don't have that relationship with food, and they're oftentimes not willing to try the food that they're either growing or that is in front of them. It took me, I used to help kids in like after school programs for agriculture, and it took a kid, he was working with me for 3 years and he wouldn't eat a carrot. And so when he finally tried a carrot, we had a celebration. And then a bunch of other kids actually tried carrots too, which is like small things like that have a really large impact because kids don't have that relationship in their home. And they're also, because of the time poverty and the poverty in general, they don't necessarily have that time with their families to try those foods. One of my students, she was able to start communicating with her grandfather because she built a garden in her backyard. And she was still in high school. So it's really interacting with all of the generations and understanding that with the loss in our relationships with our own families, we also lost that relationship with the land and the water, and then also the food. And I feel like that's something that should be highlighted and can also kind of connect with David's question, how our food systems changed, and just looking at intergenerationally how families were able to have those gardens at home a lot historically, at least here or in the South Valley, not necessarily in the international district where I'm working now. And then how it kind of got lost when both parents had to start working because of the economic shifts and accessibility. And I would also say like the land health would be a really big thing, and also water access and water health too.
Thank you, Zia. I keep thinking about this, the term poverty. I have a huge problem with it. I have a huge problem with it, especially in the state of New Mexico. We didn't know we were poor. We did not know we were poor until people came into the state of New Mexico and told us we were poor. You live in dirt houses, you live this way, you are poor. You have, so there's, we shifted from this community of where we were wealthy people with families. Wealth meant families, networks, connections, and community. Mm-hmm. We had a very stable economy based on food and food networks for all of history. In fact, prior to the entrance of the Spanish populations that came in from, through Spain, through Mexico, through the annexation, there was always a stability around farming, communal land sharing. That's why New Mexico is a land grant. Half of our institutions, the University of New Mexico is a land grant institution. Acequias and waterways meant community. So we were in community as the state grew. And so we have long histories of land grant communities throughout all of New Mexico, including in Albuquerque and a lot of these areas. And so we had a very, very strong community culture. And that's actually the basis for this show, Querencia. That's why we chose that name for this show, because Querencia meant our place, our stronghold, and the land that we love, right? This is kind of our stronghold, our querer. So this is a place of community. That's New Mexico. I want to share a PowerPoint really fast. I want you to see what New Mexico looked like. So we think about food deserts or not being able to plant food, or there's all of these different things, or poverty. And we should be really careful about how we talk about ourselves and how we talk about poverty and time poverty. It's never going to change, right? There's 24 hours, there's sun up and sun down. So this isn't something that overnight we became poor of. Do you get what I'm saying? So we really want to think and maybe even reconceptualize, but I want to share something. Larry, am I a co-host by any chance? Awesome. Okay, I just want to share a quick little photo picture. Give me 1 second as I move my screen around. Indigenous food systems decolonial. This is a presentation that we did actually for a national food conference. So we had organizations from across the country visit New Mexico. And so these are our farmers. These are women. These are farmers. Right, we had this relationship. The only reason I'm sharing this is because I think this is just a quick point of the way that we look at food and we treat food, and the way that Indigenous, what New Mexico looked like and what it was based on. And I want to show you our farmers. And I'm going really fast through this because this is not a formal presentation. These are our farmers. These are our waffle farms. These are women. Women build our houses, led the farms. We know that we have a very arid, is that kind of a clear picture or not really?
Yes.
Can you see it? Okay, so you can see the farms, the waffle farms. So we have a very dry, arid land, and so these are all these different mechanisms for growing that have been done, for thousands of years since we moved here, since our inception. So these are just a lot of old pictures of kind of what New Mexico, this is New Mexico. And I don't know if this is the first time anyone has seen this, but I know that a lot of these areas have not been shared. Like, I don't know if all of our urban centers and locations are aware of a lot of these farming practices that date back to the inception of humans walking on New Mexican territory. and land, right? So there's a lot of knowledge and there's a lot of pieces that are kind of erased. So when we think about poverty and we think about New Mexico, the land has been severely damaged, so we know that that's affecting, but we also know that there's lots of healthy land. Like in yards, there's ways of farming, there's ways of doing things, and there's ways of thinking about poverty. So it's because of poverty or time, but it's really cultural shift. So I'm hearing everyone talk about cultural shift, right? We eat this because we don't eat this. We've never had a carrot or a bean, So there's a lot of like pieces going on there. But I think one of the ideas that Marcus, like, I think you're sharing, like, we can't do this, or it's going to take a lot to create a culture shift, but we know that public health has done much to create cultural shifts through marketing. Smoking is one of the biggest changes that we've done, right, through marketing. Public health has changed the entire culture around smoking indoors, and the way we view others who do smoke and the impacts of smoking. But maybe farming and the way we eat, needs to move into that sphere. Thinking future wise, like, how do we shift that idea around that this is normal for us to, we're struggling so hard to preserve our cultural ways, and how can we, we're struggling to keep it, and what I'm seeing here is this urban movement to learn it again, to reintegrate. So we have something going on here, and maybe there's some sort of like synergy or marketing or thing around, that we can actually shift that. And when you say you're throwing food out, that means it's not, it exists. SWAP is growing food. Lots of farmers are growing food. How do we get that out, right? So Sky has her hand up, and then I'm gonna pass it back to you all and to Saida. So if you guys want to comment.
Thank you. I was reflecting on what you guys were talking about, that idea of poverty and how we use that in language. Again, to bring up some of the surveys that we did, 44% of the folks that we surveyed identify are technically low income. But when we're out in the community, knocking on doors, talking to folk, a large portion of them don't want to use our pantry because they say they want to save it for people who really need it. And so although like we classify them as technically low income, they do not see themselves as impoverished. They don't see themselves as needing extra help. I totally agree. We do need a cultural shift. I think like culture influence a lot of our infrastructure, which is how we don't have that many grocery stores that you could walk to just get fresh produce. That is all influenced by culture, and education curriculum is one of the best mass-produced tools to quickly change a culture. And this is why outdoor learning, project-based curriculum based on your local surroundings is so crucial. I agree with Zia. A lot of kids sometimes won't eat what they grow, except for peppers when they want to compete against one another and see who can handle the jalapenos. But what I've seen and what I'm like most refreshed by working with the Van Buren after school program is the natural leaning to curiosity and the natural leaning to stewardship. When we did an exercise having students, young middle school and high school students, take care of one plant for a whole summer. Look at what's going on, tend to it. They got very protective over it over a long time, and they were able to explain like these pollinators and these pests were fighting on this leaf, and kids love, if you give them the opportunity, they love learning, they love growing, they love stewarding land. It gives them a sense of empowerment when they take a seed to a mature plant to harvest and they bring it back to their family. And so there's so much rich potential within our youth. And I feel so sad sometimes because we shut them down. But I think if we band behind a lot of policies that are out right now, I forgot the name, someone maybe could speak to it. 2 years ago, a outdoor learning curriculum state policy was passed. This year, Heinrich's office is trying to buff it up and make sure there's pedagogical training around what outdoor curriculum actually looks like for teachers. If we support these policies, both on a state, federal, even, and municipal level, and really redirect a lot of the curriculum to honor what already is, and leverage what already is instead of shutting them down, I think we could see that cultural shift, not only bringing our relationship closer to land, to food, to STEM, but it ultimately teaches a lot about ourselves. A lot of these kids did not think they would love taking care of an eggplant until it's, the end of the season, and they learn a lot about themselves. Thank you again for giving me time.
Thank you. Before we open it up, and I'll hand it to you, Diana, is if there's anybody in our audience or on Facebook, or you have community members, relatives that are interested in receiving food or these services, I would ask all of our guests if you could put your information in the chat so that we can share that out. So if there's anyone in our public or anyone in our viewership that is interested, and maybe they want to volunteer, maybe they want to get, maybe they want to work with Sky or with Zia, or they want to support, we're always looking for monetary support as well, right? Donations, seeds, or anything that they might need. But if you could put your information in that so people can contact you, that would be great. We want to make sure that we share that out with the public and create more of awareness. What this looks like is that we need a working group. And I'm sure you have working groups that are out there, and that bring all of you together again on a regular basis to kind of network and build and strengthen this network, because I see so much synergy. I see so many different pieces that could benefit, one organization or the other, or, bringing USIDE on to additional Head Start programs or things like that. There's a lot of, there's so much amazing work. Thank you guys for sharing that. I wanted to, here you go, Diana, if you want to go ahead and
thank you. Saira, you had your hand up for quite a bit. Did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to respond, Carmela, thank you for reminding us that the word poverty, like, how are we talking about ourselves? How have, the Indigenous ways that you just showed us, were denigrated, when in fact they were ways people now want to go back to, right? The sustainable home building, the sustainable farming. So I appreciate that. And similarly, when the term food desert was first created through USDA and defined, initially they were talking about it being how close you were to a large store. And it was traditional communities who said, well, I don't want to just say, just because I don't have a Walmart doesn't mean that we don't have farms, we don't have farmers markets, we don't have people who are growing, because when we define it that way, then the policy result could be we need more Walmart, we need more big box stores, if we're using the wrong terminology. So I just appreciate that you were naming that, because in the future, when we say things that we don't look at another way of thinking about things, especially these ways that you lifted up, we can really go down the wrong way in the future. And so I'm glad people pushed back on that definition, and they had to change it to where are people's food sources, instead of just believing everybody has to go to a big box store. So thanks.
Thank you, Saida. Zia, did you want to jump in?
I was just wanting to respond on the comment of networks. The Urban Ag Coalition in the International District is a good network if you guys are located over there doing urban growing for your community. So please reach out if you are interested in being a part of those email lists or the monthly meetings that we do.
Thank you
so much, Zia. And oh my gosh, that hour, it flew by.
Our hour is gone and we don't want to stop. I think that we need to continue this conversation and possibly do a second Salud or a second show where we can, I really want to, get the awareness out there, help those that need to build a stronger network. That's what we're here for. Explore these topics, bring in some of our other farmers, our native farmers from our pueblos, from Dineta, from the Navajo Nation, and, from our northern pueblos that have been farming this land, from Isleta, and just to talk about how can we, go against or challenge, our water is being challenged. How do we do it collectively? How do we do this? But I mean, bringing people together in those conversations, I think, are critical, right? There's so many different pieces. But I want to thank you for coming here today and sharing your expertise and your insight. Just so critical. Thank you so much. Yeah, all of your information, if you could put it in the chat, we'd love to share that out. And again, yeah, if anybody, if you have ideas or guests, or you would like to participate in a show, or you would like to help sponsor one of our Salud shows, we would love that also. We're hoping to bring on some of our local cooks, our local chefs that prepare traditional foods using our food sources and for on the show. So we want to do something like that in the future, but definitely follow us with Salud y Querencia. A lot of our shows, we did a traditional medicine a few months ago. So we had some of our curanderos that are local and from Mexico City come on and share that knowledge. And so I think all of these shows intersect around public health and culture. This summer, we're hoping to do a larger show, which will be out in the public. We'll be filming outdoors, and this would be something that involves music, dance, sound. And so these are all the critical pieces of public health that go, right? The culture cures, la cultura cura, like these are really critical pieces. And so we want to bring those to you. And so we just thank you for being part of the best part of this, and that's you all. So thank you so much. Thank you to Enrique Cardial. Thank you to our sponsors, the Community Rebuild, CDC grant, and all of those that have been here supporting us. So thank you. And big shout out to Camilla. Thank you for your poetry, and thank you for participating in all of these different efforts that we have. And we are 2 minutes over, so thank you so much. We're going to jump off
everyone.
Facebook. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.